I am an old man, and over the course of my long life, I have witnessed things no mortal should ever behold. Acts of cruelty so vile they freeze the blood. Supernatural horrors that defy all understanding. I've seen shadows stir where none should move, and heard whispers that echo in the silence of the night. Now I sit here in this cursed old chair to share what I've seen. Stories that will make your skin crawl and your heart race, if you dare to listen. I work at a funeral home. Some of the dead bodies are smiling. It took me many hours of internet sleuthing to find out any information, but I finally did. A few random posts on local websites claimed the building sites had been abandoned because the soil had too much clay in it, or the rock underneath wasn't structurally sound. But there was one post on a local forum last year that I would have easily dismissed as a conspiracy theory if I hadn't been dealing with smiling dead bodies on a day-to-day basis. Did you know they found this really weird dead animal where they're building those big houses by Johnson Park? My husband's cousin works on the construction team. He said when they were excavating, they found this dead animal, except it looked like nothing he'd ever seen. A really long, thin body and bluish-white skin, like a cave creature or something, like our very own Montauk monster. I stared at the computer screen, stunned. That was it. That thing must have died from whatever the pathogen was. And when it was dug up, it infected someone. Patient 0. I told Alan everything I found. Unfortunately, he seemed to take me less seriously than before, his eyebrows raising higher and higher as I told him everything. So you think the construction workers dug up this monster and then it spread some disease to them, somehow? Yeah. Did any of the construction workers die? I frowned. She didn't say anything about it, but like you said, the pathogen doesn't kill people. Yeah, but wasn't this last year? We would have been getting smiling bodies for months then, if what you're saying is true. I think they only broke ground on the last 2 houses recently. Besides, maybe it has a dormant phase or something. Alan sighed. I mean, I suppose everything you're saying could be true, but it sounds extremely far-fetched. I know. I'll think on it. I promise this time his tone sounded more sincere. But right now, we've got to get back into work. A few bodies arrived today, and one of them is smiling, so good luck with that. I bought new adhesive, by the way, extra strength. I got the message that this was the end of the conversation, loud and clear. Reluctantly, I walked out of his office and headed back to the morgue. Ben was already in there, working on someone else. He glanced up at me and grinned. "Left the smiling one for you," he said. "Oh, great, thanks," I replied, rolling my eyes. This day was just getting worse and worse by the minute. As I flipped through the man's files, however, I felt a rush of relief. "He's supposed to be cremated," I told Ben. "Oh, cool," I rolled my eyes. Ben loved the cremator. For some reason, not many people in Clearwater chose to be cremated. Whenever one did, Ben got excited. What is it with some people and fire? We rolled the body down to the cremator and got the man inside. The door clanked shut, and Ben adjusted the settings, then looked at me. I gave him a thumbs up. He pulled the lever. The flames whooshed on, and then we heard it. A faint, high-pitched screech joined the pops and crackles of the fire, almost like the shrill sound of a whistle, except more human. Ben and I looked at each other, eyes wide. "What is that?" I asked. "Should I turn it off?" Ben replied, his face white. I nodded. He yanked the lever down, but it was too late. The remains had already been reduced to lumps of charred ash. "There's no chance he was actually alive, right?" Ben asked. "No." For the first time, he looked utterly panicked. So even though I wasn't particularly fond of Ben, I gently led him back to the morgue and showed him the records. The man had died several days ago and been stored in a refrigerated cabinet. There was no way he could be still alive. Ben, relieved, excused himself for an early lunch break. I sat there alone in the morgue, phone in hand, swiveling gently in the chair. Something was bothering me, though I didn't want to tell Ben. First, even if the man was dead, there could still be a parasite alive inside him. Could things like leeches and tapeworms make noise? A quick search told me yes. There was a 3-centimeter marine worm that lived off the coast of Japan, for example, that could make loud popping sounds. Oosh! But there was something else bothering me too. We usually leave the bodies in the cremator for 2 to 3 hours because while the soft tissue gets reduced to ash pretty fast, the bones take hours to fully carbonize. The remains we pulled out should have been a skeleton. Instead, they were just a pile of ash. How did an entire skeleton burn up so fast? I spent the rest of the day sneaking away on my phone, researching, but everything seemed to reach a dead end. I raked through the entire 10-page forum thread where the woman had talked about the body found at the construction site. But my faith in her story started to flag. On page 3, she linked to her blog post, which was filled with both obnoxious ads and talk about aliens. She claimed they'd found metal scraps at the construction site too, burned and twisted. Our very own Roswell incident. I sighed, shaking my head. I then did a ton of searches whether certain pathogens or parasites could alter bone density. The whole thing about the skeleton not burning up seemed like the only fact I could cling to. It wasn't a gray area, it was black and white. The bones burned up when they shouldn't have. That didn't come up with much though. Most parasites were uninterested in bones. I got out a piece of paper and wrote down everything I knew so far. The convergence of cases on Highview Lane, the weird construction site, the smiling bodies, which had other abnormalities, not bruising, weighing less than they should, and burning up faster. After that, I wrote down everyone involved. The police, Sheriff Thompson, the coroner Jack, the delivery companies, and the 3 of us, Alan, Ben, me. Several more searches only produced one interesting fact. That was probably more of a coincidence than anything else. The man who led one of the delivery companies was named Elias. The guy who worked on the construction site on Highview Lane, mentioned in the forum posts, was also named Elias. A spark of an idea lit within me. Could Elias be patient 0? Hard at work, I see, Alan said, when he found me sitting in the morgue staring at my phone. Oh, sorry, I said hastily. Just taking a quick break. He didn't look happy. Ugh, well, it was true that I'd spent a good part of the workday on my phone. Sorry, I said again. No, it's fine. Listen, we have a delivery on the way, but I got to get home. Jay's got a fever and stuff. Can you stay? I guess so. Did Ben already leave? Yeah, he cut out 10 minutes early, Alan said with a sigh. Anyway, they should be here by 6. If they're not, you can just leave. And if they're mad, they have to take the body back to the coroner. That's their problem. I think the power's out in a few places, though. There was some bad thunder earlier. Yeah, well, another sigh. Anyway, I'll lock up and everything. All you need to worry about is getting the body in. I'll pay overtime, of course, too. Sounds good. Alan left, and then it was just me, alone in the funeral home. Great. I sat by the window, waiting, watching the rain pound on the glass. The street and sidewalk glistened red, reflecting the myriad of taillights from all the braking cars. I saw a couple hurry past, angling their umbrella in front of them to try and block the rain. As the woman glanced up at our sign, she scrunched her face in disgust. We usually didn't get pedestrians here, even though we were just off Main Street. People didn't like being reminded of their own mortality. And then the delivery arrived. A sleek, dark van rolling into the driveway. My heart pounded as I realized the text on the door read Everson Delivery Services. That was the delivery company Elias ran. I hurried downstairs. The funeral home is on a hill, and the back door is on the basement level with the morgue. Alan thought it was so convenient, but I thought it was a nuisance going up and down stairs all the time. When I finally got to the back door, the two men were already rolling the body out of the back. "Thanks for waiting," the shorter one said, smiling at me. "Hey, can I ask you something? You work for Elias, right?" His smile instantly dropped. "We've been getting some bodies that have been smiling," I continued in a hushed tone. "Have you seen them?" "Nope, haven't seen anything like that," the taller man replied, shaking his head. "Do you happen to have Elias's phone number by any chance?" The two men exchanged a glance. "Sorry, can't do that," the shorter one said. "Why not?" "He's a very private person," the taller one said, rolling the cart down the ramp. "But here you go," he said, cutting me off. Then the two men hurried back into the van. They quickly pulled out, sloshing rain everywhere, leaving me alone with the body. That was weird, really weird. Usually the people handling the delivery always roll the body into the morgue for us. Common courtesy in the funeral home world. But I'd spooked them with my questions about Elias. They didn't want me to know anything about him. I'm onto something. I rolled the body down the hallway myself, the metal wheels clattering against the floor. I made a sharp right into the morgue, then called Alan to let him know. Before loading the body into the cabinet, I always did a quick check. Sometimes they got a little jostled in transit, and I wouldn't want to store the body with their face tilted to the side, for example. I unzipped the body bag. No, I recognized her. Mildred Hastings, the old woman that lived 2 floors down from me. I saw her all the time. She had a little yippy dog she would walk all the time. She talked to me when I got my mail. She even invited me over for tea one time when I was locked out of my apartment. Mildred was dead. And she was smiling. The same smile that all of them had, except this time it was twisting features that were familiar to me, a face that I knew. The floor spun underneath me. I leaned against the cabinet and held myself steady, a wave of nausea rolling through me. I forced my breathing to slow. In, out, in, out. I needed to calm down. All I needed to do was zip her up, get her in the cabinet and leave. That's all I had to do. Then I'd be on my way home, to snuggling up in a blanket and watching TV. The phone rang. I jumped about a foot in the air, swearing. I stumbled out of the morgue and into Alan's office. Ring! The shrill sound pierced the silence. "I'm coming," I muttered under my breath, my legs wobbly beneath me. I picked it up on the 3rd ring. "Hello? Is this Moyna Funeral Home?" The voice on the other end of the line asked. "Yes?" "Hi, this is Dan with Meadow Services. I'm calling to schedule the delivery of Mildred Hastings." I frowned. "What do you mean, schedule it? She was just delivered a few minutes ago." A pause. "That's not possible." A creeping dread trickled down my back. "What do you mean?" "We have her body right here," he said. "We didn't make the delivery today because of the storm." My heart plummeted to the floor. What the fuck? No. There must be a mistake, I stuttered. "We just got her. She's in the morgue right now." "Maybe you're getting her confused with another delivery." Number this was the only delivery we were waiting for. My body went cold. My head spun. "Can you just tell me if tomorrow afternoon is okay, Mom?" the voice said on the other line. "It's fine," I told him, then hung up the phone. Black dots danced in my vision. I sat down in Alan's chair before I had the chance to faint. It didn't make sense. It was her body. Unless... The realization came crashing down on me. John Ivanov, the mugging victim with no bruises, the woman who weighed 97 pounds, the man's bones that burned up too fast in the crematory, and the smiles that kept reappearing over and over. What if the bodies weren't the real bodies of the deceased? What if someone, somewhere along the chain, was trading out all the corpses for different ones? Clones, replicas, ones that were smiling, that kept smiling no matter how many times we set their features. I pulled up our records and typed in a few names of smiling bodies that I remembered, like John Ivanov and Jasmine Thomas. My heart dropped when I saw all of them came from Everson Delivery Services. I ran out of the office, heart pounding in my ears. I ran into the morgue and froze. Mildred's body was gone. The body bag was zipped all the way down and it was empty. No, no, no. I ran over, hardly believing it. I unzipped the bag all the way and pressed my hands inside, as if a 180-pound woman could be hiding somewhere inside it. It was completely, totally empty. Every fiber of my being was screaming at me, "Get out! Get out! Now!" I turned on my heel and ran down the hallway, sprinting towards the back door. I stopped dead in my tracks. Standing in the dark hallway, silhouetted by the glass door behind her, was the naked figure of Mildred Hastings. She stood perfectly still. Her dark eyes glinted. Her white hair fell in messy, scraggly curls over her face. Her skin hung loose on her body, her bare feet sticking to the linoleum floor beneath her. And she was smiling that horrible, stretched grin. I whipped around and ran. Thunder rumbled behind me, rattling the glass. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my entire body shaking. I burst onto the first floor, ran to the front door, twisted the knob. No. Alan had locked up when he left. That included locking the front door with the deadbolt that only he had the key to. For a split second, I thought about going back downstairs, but then I heard it. Mildred's footsteps coming up the stairs. What do I do? The footsteps got louder. I ran down the hallway and wrenched at one of the windows, but I was 2 stories up. The fall could kill me, especially since it wasn't grass beneath, but hard pavement. I swallowed. I have to hide. I have to... Kriak! Mildred had made it to the top of the stairs. I shot out of the hallway and into the nearest room, the showroom. About a dozen caskets and coffins stood before me, of every shape and size. They glinted in the dim light, polished to perfection, alongside arrangements of fake flowers and easels displaying portraits of random people. I picked one at random, a heavy mahogany casket engraved with a cross, and climbed in. I picked one at random, a heavy mahogany casket engraved with a cross, and climbed in. Then I pulled the heavy lid back over me, lowering it as gently as I could so it wouldn't thunk shut. As soon as I was in total darkness, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "Please," I whispered, my words muffled in the soft, puffy cotton sides of the casket. "Please help me." I gave the woman on the other line the address. Then all I could do was wait. Thump. I heard Mildred's footsteps enter the room. Every muscle in my body froze. My breath sounded incredibly loud, like it was being piped through a surround sound stereo, so I held my breath. But even my heartbeat, the rush of blood through my veins, sounded incredibly loud, locked in this casket. Thump. "Please don't find me, please." The footsteps were getting progressively louder. I couldn't see anything. It was pure darkness, like I was buried in the earth itself. I began to panic. Why am I hiding here? If she finds me, I have no escape. I should have hid in a doorway or under the stairs so I could keep running, keep changing hiding spots. I always sucked at hide and seek. Thump. I held my breath, my entire body shaking. Thump. And then the footsteps stopped. She was right there. She seemed to have found the casket I was in. I could feel the heaviness of her presence, weighing down on the hot air of the casket itself, pressing down on me, smothering me. The casket lid opened. Mildred's face loomed over me. Her skin hung loosely over her skull. Her dark eyes twinkled, and her lips were stretched taut into that horrible grin. Then her mouth opened wider and wider, until her jaw unhinged completely. Within her throat, I could see 2 glittering black eyes and the pale, bluish flesh of a creature who has never seen the sun. Just like the creature they found on Highview Lane, I thought dimly. The creature didn't infect people with a parasite. It is the parasite. For a second, I was paralyzed. Then I pulled my knees up to my chest and kicked at her as hard as I could. Mildred staggered back. I scrambled out of the casket, the heavy lid scraping along my back, almost pinning me down. But I made my way out, fighting for my life, until I fell onto the floor. She lunged at me. My gaze caught on one of the enormous easels. I grabbed it and pointed one leg of it at her mouth. "Don't get any closer," I shouted. Of course, the creature in there didn't understand. As soon as Mildred took a jerky, stumbling step forward, I thrust the leg into her open mouth. An inhuman screech filled the room. I dropped the easel and ran down the stairs. I made it to the back door and burst through it out into the storm. A torrent of rain fell onto me, soaking me. Thunder rumbled in the distance, cut with the sound of distant sirens. I stumbled towards the road, glancing back a final time. Mildred wasn't following. When the police broke into the building, they found Mildred's eviscerated body. It appeared to have just been a shell, completely hollowed out on the inside. As for the creature that was living inside of her, there was no sign of it. Or so they said. Sometimes I wonder if they actually captured it and took it off to some secret government compound for examination. Everson Delivery Services promptly went out of business. Elias Everson skipped town and disappeared off the map completely. I wonder if he's really Elias at all, or if he's simply a meat suit, a shell, controlled by one of the alien creatures. Because a few weeks later, while I was in the checkout line, I saw the headline on a tabloid newspaper. "Wife comes back from the dead." I flipped open the magazine and skimmed the article. It claimed the woman had been dead for over 24 hours and spent the night in a funeral home. I stared at the photo of the woman, glossy on the page. She had her hands together like she was clapping, and her mouth was open in a shout of joy. Maybe it was just the low-quality ink the crappy paper tabloids use. But I thought I could see a strange glint at the back of her mouth. Maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe real human bodies are too full of bones and organs and blood to inhabit, so they build a replica based on the corpses of those who have died. Maybe their plan was always to animate those shells and come back into their grieving families' lives. Or maybe all of this was just practice, and maybe there are now shells walking around all over the place. Maybe they don't wait for the victims to die on their own anymore. Maybe these creatures lay in wait in alleyways and dark corners, ready to pick us off one by one and steal our lives. Whatever their plan, they were clever. The police never found where all the real dead bodies went, and the other 30 smiling corpses were sent to a lab for examination. The ones that had already been buried were exhumed. Sheriff Thompson told us it was a parasite, something in the water, highly contagious. Areas of Clearwater were cordoned off for decontamination. Highview Lane was evacuated. But I know the truth, because Alan and I kept one of the smiling corpses. The family had asked that he be cremated, and we gave them fake ashes instead. I know, that's a horrible thing to do, except it isn't that horrible when you consider the remains weren't even his to begin with. Alan and I set the body on the table in front of us, staring at each other. "You ready?" he asked, his voice shaky. "I am," I replied. Alan sunk a scalpel into the dead man's chest. He peeled back the skin, and when I leaned forward, I almost threw up. The man had no ribs, no organs, nothing that was remarkably human. In their place was a creature with pale bluish skin, folded in on itself. Hands shaking, I leaned over the man's face and pulled his mouth open. Beyond his teeth, in the darkness of his throat, I could see a pale face, eyes closed, as if it were sleeping. Alan and I gave each other a look. Then we rolled the body off to the cremator.